Sardinia, Italy. A private villa rented for the night. An ice sculpture of Michelangelo's David stands in the courtyard, dispensing vodka. The bill for the evening comes to $2 million. Half of it, billed to the company. None of this, the vodka, the togas, the $2 million villa, was the crime a jury would need. That crime was invisible. It was buried inside Tyco's own loan and bonus paperwork. So, how does $150 million in theft hide inside a legitimate paycheck? Welcome to Tycoons and Traitors. Empires built on nerve, and the greed that brought them down. By the time prosecutors were done, they'd traced roughly $150 million that Dennis Kozlowski took from Tyco International, his own company, dressed up as pay. Getting there would take a shower curtain, a mistrial, and a jury that finally saw what a spreadsheet never could. Kozlowski didn't inherit Tyco. He climbed it. He was a working-class kid from Newark, the son of a police investigator, who spent 2 decades clawing his way up the ranks of an industrial conglomerate before the board finally made him chief executive in 1992. He took over a sleepy maker of pipes, valves, and fire alarms, and then he put it into overdrive. He rebuilt Tyco, one aggressive acquisition at a time, transforming it into a sprawling global empire that spanned electronics, healthcare, and security systems. Under his watch, Tyco swallowed up hundreds of companies, and its stock price soared. The acquisitions worked. Revenue climbed year after year, Wall Street cheered every move, and Kozlowski became one of the highest-paid, most celebrated executives in America. He was the self-made colossus who could do no wrong. But success like that buys something else too. A board of directors that stops asking questions. When a CEO is delivering that kind of relentless growth, the people supposed to be watching the treasury tend to look the other way, assuming the golden goose is too valuable to interrogate. To keep executives happy, Tyco ran a key employee loan program. On paper, it was entirely legitimate, a mundane corporate benefit meant to help relocating executives cover their moving costs or handle the tax hits on their stock options. But Kozlowski quietly turned it into a personal slush fund. He used the company's money to finance a lavish lifestyle, private jets, luxury real estate, and high-end investments. Then, according to prosecutors, tens of millions of dollars in those loans was simply forgiven. The debt was wiped clean, completely off the books, without the board of directors ever formally signing off on the erasure. The forgiven loans were only the start of the extraction. Prosecutors say Kozlowski also authorized roughly $81 million in bonuses to himself and other top executives. Again, this wasn't done with a crowbar in the dead of night. It was done with a pen. The bonuses were awarded without the full board's approval on the corporate record. On paper, to a casual observer, it simply read as executive compensation. In practice, it was Kozlowski and his inner circle unilaterally approving their own massive paydays from the company vault. But the piece that actually cracked the case open wasn't a bonus line item or a forgiven loan. It was art. Kozlowski spent $14.7 million of company money on masterpiece paintings for his own walls. To avoid paying New York sales tax on the purchases, he had the invoices shipped to Tyco's corporate office in New Hampshire. Meanwhile, the actual paintings went straight to his $30 million Manhattan apartment. Investigators later discovered that the crates supposedly carrying those masterpieces to New Hampshire had been shipped entirely empty. That brazen, clumsy sales tax scheme is what first drew the attention of Manhattan prosecutors. They pulled the thread on the empty crates, and the entire $150 million sweater unraveled. And it wasn't just Kozlowski dipping into the till. The culture of extraction reached the board itself. In 2001, Tyco director Frank Walsh received a $20 million fee simply for helping arrange the company's acquisition of the CIT group. That massive payout was never disclosed to the rest of the board or the shareholders. So the theft wasn't just one bad decision or an isolated lapse in judgment. It was a well-oiled machine. Relocation loans, unauthorized bonuses, art schemes, and a boardroom kickback, each one carefully dressed up as ordinary corporate business. Here's the problem prosecutors actually had. You cannot make a jury feel a line item in a loan forgiveness memo. So they built their case around objects instead. The $6,000 gold shower curtain in Kozlowski's Manhattan apartment. The $15,000 umbrella stand. The party video from Sardinia. The excess wasn't the crime itself. It was the evidence trail that finally made an abstract $150 million theft visible to 12 ordinary people. And if that's the part of this story nobody tells you, that the curtain didn't steal anything, a man did, and the curtain only made it visible. That's exactly the kind of detail worth a like on this video, so more people run into it too. By early 2004, the first trial was days from a verdict. The prosecution had laid out the loans, the bonuses, and the excessive spending, and the jury was deliberating. Then, the entire case collapsed in a bizarre twist. A juror was reported to have made an OK hand gesture toward the defense table during the proceedings. Within hours, the tabloids had named and targeted that juror, publishing her name and face, and creating a media circus that tainted the jury pool beyond repair. The judge had no choice. A mistrial was declared. After all the evidence and all the testimony, Kozlowski walked out of that courtroom a free man, at least for the moment. But the prosecution wasn't done. At the retrial, the stakes were even higher, and Kozlowski made the risky decision to take the stand himself. Under oath, he attempted to defend the payouts. He admitted his pay package was confusing, and even called it embarrassingly big. But he stubbornly insisted that none of it was actually a crime. He argued it was all just aggressive corporate compensation, standard for a CEO of his caliber. The jury disagreed. They saw through the paperwork. On June 17, 2005, Dennis Kozlowski and former CFO Mark Swartz were found guilty on 22 counts, including grand larceny, falsifying business records, securities fraud, and conspiracy. The reckoning was absolute. The sentence handed down was severe: 8 years and 4 months to 25 years in state prison. On top of the prison time, Kozlowski was ordered to pay a staggering $134 million in restitution, plus additional fines. He fought the conviction for years, but his legal options finally ran out when the Supreme Court declined to hear the case in 2009. The man who once ruled a global empire and threw $2 million parties ended up serving roughly 6.5 years behind bars before finally being granted parole in 2014. If stories like this, the ones where the crime hides in plain sight, inside paperwork everyone assumed was legitimate, are the reason you're here, subscribing to Tycoons and Traitors is where every one of them lives. Here's the uncomfortable part. Every mechanism Kozlowski abused, the loan program, the bonuses, the board approvals, existed legally, on paper, before he ever touched them. The line between aggressive pay and grand larceny wasn't drawn by an auditor or by the numbers. It was drawn by a shower curtain. It took a symbol, not a spreadsheet, to finally convict what the paperwork had been hiding for years. So the real question isn't whether Kozlowski got caught, it's how much other self-dealing right now is still waiting for a symbol big enough to make anyone look.